just so you know. So watch your language. No, I don't care if you curse, but no, it's going live.
I'm about to drop a couple F-bombs. I'm sorry right now.
I'm going to kick the YouTube feed there that in. Awesome. Just so you know. So, am I still on the Open Talk share screen with you guys?
Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. Very good. I'm kicking in the local record now. All right, you guys ready to do this?
All ready for this?
Let's do this. I'm gonna write some people in.
If you need water, I have water.
Okay.
Just get it.
I'll drink the whole thing.
Hey, good evening, everybody. And we're gonna let this room fill up for just a second, and then we'll get ready to start very shortly.
Just gotta, posture. Ooh.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna pull something. Yeah, bro.
Well, good evening and welcome to Open Talk. This is episode 14. And what a week it's been. Every week seems like it's a year, and it keeps getting more taxing and emotional, and there's so many highs and lows. And I am so excited that I'm bringing on two guests tonight. One that I work very closely with, Jessica Foley, and Steve Sweatpants. You're welcome. I want to thank you for being here. As a New Yorker, we're going to have a lot to talk about. So guys, say hi and welcome to Open Talk.
Hi.
Hey, what's up?
What is going on? What is going on? How are things in your world right now? How are you coping? What's going on? What's new? How is everything?
You first.
No, ladies first.
Things are cooking. It is hot in here. Summer is right around the block.
Have you started kicking on the AC yet, or are you AC free people?
Full blast. I run hot, so it has to be on at all times. But yeah, things are good. Things are busy. Luckily, happy to be busy, and interestingly busier than usual. So that's always nice.
That's good to hear. I know that you guys have been doing a lot of stuff that I'm excited to get into, and I want to kick right into it. And usually we go one photographer to another, and we're going to do that again today. So Jessica, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to kick it off with you. And I know you because of APA New York, and you're the regional director of APA. Why don't you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so I've been the regional director for the New York chapter for about 3 years now. If you've ever emailed APA, you've probably emailed me at some point. Or if you've ever gone to our events, we're always just, trying to put on events to help the community be more successful as photographers. Whether it's portfolio reviews or peer reviews or networking events, literally anything. We just try to do what we can to help you be successful. And we're a board of photographers as well. So yeah.
And just to kind of kick into that, I've been part of an APA and chairman for a little over a year and a half. And I can't tell you how invaluable Jessica is, how much I value her voice, what an incredible member of the community is that she is, and how important she is to APA and all of us in New York. So I want, first and foremost, thank you so much for all you do and how appreciated you are.
Thank you. Likewise, Travis, for you.
So let's dive right into it. Where were you born?
I'm from Los Angeles, California. Actually, specifically a small town called West Covina.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that where you grew up? Is that where you spent, where were the formative, the first, 15 years of your life?
Yeah, I spent my first 15 years in West Covina. I went to West Covina High School. And I didn't start moving out to like official LA until I graduated high school. The second I graduated, I moved to Pasadena, and then I spent most of my time between Pasadena, Eagle Rock, and out like downtown LA.
Yeah.
Moved to New York about 4 years ago.
Your parents were, what did they do?
My dad was an engineer, now retired, and loves to play baccarat in Las Vegas. He's a professional baccarat player now.
Is that right? Oh, that's pretty cool.
Might as well be. That's our excuse. And then my mom is a Thai. She's from Thailand. Thai woman. She's been in the U.S. since she came here when she was about 18, and she still lives in LA. And I am the youngest of 6 siblings. I have 5 older brothers and sisters, so we're all pretty much LA and spread out throughout the states.
So where did the camera come into play, and your love for art and stuff like that? If it was not from your parents, or was there someone in the family, or where did the influence come in? Or
it was definitely my dad. My dad is, as an engineer, he was a huge tech guy, so he always had the gadgets and stuff. And for as long as I can remember, I always had some sort of camera, whether it was like a disposable.
Do you remember what your very first camera was? Like the very first one that you like, this is mine?
I remember the very first one I could say this was mine. I was given a Canon Rebel XTI when I was like 8th or 9th grade in high school. That's when I really started diving into photography and taking photos of all my friends and all that good stuff. But I didn't actually start taking it seriously until my senior year in high school. I went to Thailand with one of my best friends, and I brought a film camera with me for the first time. And I shot completely on film, and I just fell in love with it. And after having that feeling, I came back home from Thailand, and I was just like, this is something that really makes me happy, and something I really wanted to see if I could pursue. And I never had really pursued art before, as thought to pursue it as a career. So that was really a big turning point for me.
So what steps did you take to further it? I mean, you said you really got interested in high school, right? And so where did you go from there, and how did it grow for you?
Well, even though I was really interested in it, I was always taking photos. I always had a camera with me, but I still had to appease like my dad's expectation that I was going to go to Harvard and be a lawyer. That didn't happen. I went to Cal State and got my degree in marketing management.
Which is a great degree to have as a photographer.
I was like, okay, if I'm gonna want to still do something somewhat creative that can still apply to like if I become a photographer, then that's the one. Yeah. So I got the degree, checked the box for my parents. I was the first of my siblings to graduate college, and I would take like adult classes. I took my first outside of college. It was like just an individual adult school. I took like a developing class to learn how to develop black and white and some other classes, but I didn't really start taking it like as a career until after I quit my first job after college. I had like that first, post-college job that I, thought I was.
What was your first job?
Oh my God. I was a email marketing assistant for it was like a payments company.
That sounds like a pretty legit first job to have.
It was legit. It was so dry. Do not enter the payments industry unless you're being held at gunpoint. But yeah, so after a year, I just realized this is making me miserable. I don't want to do this. And around my second year actually in college, so around 2012, 3 years prior to this, I actually met Steve. And I think that's important to mention because I was featured.
So when did you guys meet?
We officially met face to face around 2012. We'd always like followed each other on like Instagram and stuff. We were always friends, but
you guys initially just kind of met and through Instagram. Is that how you first?
Yeah, because actually, it's a funny story. Long story short, he knew my roommate at the time, who used to live in New York because they had the same barber. Yeah. But I could let him. So he found me through my roommate's Tumblr, and then eventually I got featured in issue 2. And I met the whole gang, like him, Eric, when I was still in college. And after I was featured in issue 2, that was also a big turning point for me because I saw my work published in a magazine. You know, I didn't think that was going to happen at that point in like whatever trajectory I was going. So that was really important for me. And then after I quit that job, I immediately within a month said, I'm moving to New York. I've always wanted to move to New York. I finished school. I had no more ties in LA. So I was like, F it, why not?
Were your parents on board yet, or were they like, oh, geez?
They were definitely anti.
Are they on board? Are they on board now?
It took a while. It took a while to even convince them that I wanted to pursue photography as a career, you know,
Yeah.
especially my dad. It was really hard to get him on board. And, you know, he understood like working my own hours and blah, blah, blah. But he always was trying to push me to just have a job and photography, like have the job supplement photography. He never wanted me to have, you know, whatever. So it took it until honestly into my first billboard, which was like 2 years ago, where he was like, oh, okay. I guess this is something that we can take seriously. And now he's all proud and always sends emails to my uncles and stuff.
Do you remember your first like really big gig where you were like, you probably had the nerves the night before, you were like I'm gonna fuck this up. Like, do you remember that first one?
I think it was actually a job with Street Dreams. One of my first really big gigs where I was like, okay, this is something I could actually do. I documented Tribeca Film Festival with the Street Dreams team. We were like the main team, the main content creative team on board. So that was a really big one for me. And then after that, it kind of just led into other things. Like I got to do a Nike job, which is really cool. I'm wearing Nike right now. You know, so shout out to Nike, sponsor us.
Yeah.
Sponsor.
But yeah, so
just do it.
So that was a really big one, and it just kept, you know, leading into other things that were.
So how was it picking up and coming to New York? What was the first, you know, it was, you knew people here, like how was the transition coming from you know, LA to New York?
New York ate me alive my first 6 months. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of crazy, like only in New York experiences. I lived in an artist commune at some point with like 10 people. I was living at Steve's for a while because I was like in between places. And yeah, I've met a lot of people, made a lot of friends out here, but you know, being on opposite coasts it's really difficult sometimes, especially, I mean, the obvious, I miss my family, I miss my friends. Yeah. I miss tacos, I miss Mexican food.
You miss real tacos.
I miss my tacos. I miss king of tacos called King Taco.
Don't get this woman started.
So that was hard. I went through some food withdrawals for sure. But yeah, I mean, after a while, you just kind of get on board, you learn the trains, you meet people, and you just realize the beauty of New York. New York's incredible. And everyone always asks me, like, are you coming home yet? It's like, actually, I can't foresee myself coming home yet. It's not the right time.
So there was a certain energy to New York that really kind of just.
Oh, for sure.
For you.
I always walk too fast for LA. People are always like, you need to slow down. And when I came to New York, I could finally walk my speed, and like people were walking the same speed as me. And that is literal and a metaphor for how just my brain works and just my mentality is.
Boy, do I understand that. I talk too fast. I talk too fast all the time. I have to slow myself down. I'm always like trying to get to the next place. So I know I always ask for examples of photo work. So I'm going to jump in and, you know, the very first one you can talk about, and let's dive right into it.
All right. So I actually sent you 2 projects that really meant a lot to me that I did this year. This first one was I documented for New Balance. They dropped their first shoe that was produced basically completely by women. It was for Women's Month, and our whole team was all women as well, which was really magical. It's very rare that happens. And yeah, it really meant a lot to me to show the behind the scenes of the factory workers and these women who are just grinding every day. We were out there for a couple of days, just showing their process, and then ultimately this shoe that's like meant for women. So this was a really momentous project.
Did you get the shoe?
I'm still waiting for the shoe. I will say it was supposed to be sent, and then COVID hit.
Yeah. So obviously one of the things that you're such an advocate about is women and the workplace and equal rights and stuff like that. And you do a series for APA called Her Perspective. Um, Talk about that a little bit and the importance of that to you.
Well, just in general, I feel that every industry, specific and even more specifically in photography, is super male dominated, and to take it a step further, very white male dominated. And especially in photography associations, you find that that hasn't really changed. And so with APA New York, we wanted to, we're constantly looking for ways to diversify and to highlight other parts of the community. And after I got, I helped get two ladies on the board, Kezi and Claudia, we were able to put together events specifically highlighting women in photography. We've now done 3 events, 4 if you count
The virtual?
The virtual one. We highlighted moms in photography, and every aspect of it that we could put together, basically. And we're still hoping to push this out even further.
What are the conversations you think we need to have? Because I mean, it seems like a no-brainer that it should be this way. But how do you get people to understand that there is a difference, and how do we get people to have these conversations, especially the men in the industry?
I think it's just that. I think it's having the conversation. Having the conversation raises awareness, and it helps people see the other perspectives to things. Just having these conversations, informing people about how things have been, showing statistics for the people who need to see numbers. We don't really do the number crunching as much, but I think just talking about our stories and our it's literally her perspective. We want to talk about our individual perspectives as women in this industry and what it's been like, and the struggles that we may go through that men might not realize. Especially the mom one that we just did was really eye-opening. Even for me, wanting to be a mother eventually and hearing about what that was like for a lot of women. So we just hope that through, also another one of our initiatives through Her Perspective is to have a networking aspect where ideally we're trying to get a lot more people who are in positions to hire photographers to come to these events as much as we can, because we want the women in the audience who are photographers and the women on stage to network and hopefully build those collaborations or those relationships so that they can collaborate in the future. Whether that's for work or just for personal work, it's always just good to have women in your corner.
And just to say, I will take credit just as much as you, because they are so awesome, Kezi and Claudia, for bringing them to the board, because they are just amazing people and such caring, talented people that are taking a lot of their own time to help out in this community. So let's jump back to the next photo here, and I believe this is still in the same series.
Yeah, still the same series. This is all shot on film too, so.
It's one thing I notice about your photography. Photographers, a lot of photographers say, I don't have a style. They don't realize they have a style. No matter, it seems, what you're shooting, whether it's a protest or fashion or something very documentary work, you have a certain softness, empathy, and calmness about your photos. Is this something that you've developed, or what? Do you think you have a style?
Honestly, it's crazy to hear that, because I've never thought that about my work, and it's great to hear that, because I'm still trying to find my exact voice, and it's kind of redundant to even say that, because I don't think we're ever gonna find a finalized style. I think we're constantly evolving as artists and as photographers, and I think my goal is always just to tell the story, and I shoot very reportage style, very BTS, and so I want you to feel like you're there. And I really love to be the fly on the wall, to be honest, when I'm shooting. And I just hope that kind of comes off in the photos, that the moments are authentic, and this is just what it was like when I was in the factory.
What are the main things that move you as we're moving into the second of the series? What are the main things that trigger you as a photographer? Is it colors? Is it empathy? Is it composition? What is it that you're really looking for when you're about to take that shot?
Kind of all of the above. Composition is definitely my number one. I would say composition, colors, and light are the first things that I'm looking at. If I see an incredible shadow, I'm running to get that shadow. Or if I see, a moment that's just composed naturally perfectly, I will literally run with 20 pounds of gear. And then definitely empathy is ideal. If I could withdraw or pull that emotion from the subjects, then that's always the goal.
Yeah.
But basically, I just want you to feel like you're there.
So let's move into this next series of photos, and why don't you tell me about this?
So this next series is this was my last job actually before COVID hit, end of February. I was asked to go with Studio Elsewhere to document the migration of the monarch butterflies in Michoacan, Mexico. And honestly, it was a dream job. I just love to travel in general. So eventually ended up shooting travel stuff, but anything documentary is kind of up my alley of where I want to go further. And
Yeah.
this experience in itself was just so magical, just seeing all the monarch butterflies and learning about them, and you know, the fact that they're facing extinction and what we can do to help. It's just really deep. And Studio Elsewhere is actually putting on the photos were actually going to be used for promo materials because they're having a pop-up installation supposed to be in September, but I don't know if it's happening anymore, but in London. And it's going to be a sensory experience. They got the scents, they got the sounds, and you're just supposed to be engulfed in it, and it's supposed to raise awareness for the fact that they are facing extinction and what we can do to help.
So in a moment like this, I mean, I know as I get older and I finally found what I love, photography, and I'm able to kind of capture things like that. I'm getting bigger and more emotional and more sap every day. Like I get teary eyed at watching, things that I shouldn't probably, like, America's Greatest Talent. Like, oh, those are beautiful. I can't believe they can sing their story. Like when you're out in nature with something so beautiful and so overwhelming, did you like, we sometimes get lost behind the camera. Did you just get overwhelmed, or did you take a moment to sit down and really absorb
Oh my
all
God.
of this nature's beauty?
It was 100% yes. I think that especially when you're traveling, it's really easy to get lost behind your viewfinder and you just snap, snap, snap. And then the end of the day, it's happened to me so many times, you realize like, what did I even do today? Like I wasn't even really present during that time. So I've really been consciously trying to take at least several moments to put the camera down and just sit and just be present, because that definitely happened. It was so spiritual, them just landing on you, brushing past you, and everyone's in complete silence. I mean, we were in a private area, but our team was just in awe. Like some of them were just laying down. This is actually Rosanna, one of my good friends, and she was the videographer. They were landing on us just like this constantly. And it was a really special experience.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful. Oh, have there been some other places that you've been to that have just kind of taken your breath away like this?
It's impossible to not mention Cuba. Cuba is one of my favorite places in the world. I've been there about 5 times now, and
it really is something special, right?
every single time it's different, it's special. I like kind of know my way around Old Havana at this point, and it's just really a beautiful place. People are beautiful. I've gained some friends from Cuba, and it's somewhere I would honestly, if possible, would love to like have a house one day.
No, I totally agree. I think my first trip to Cuba, and I've been there about 4 times now. The very first moment I got off the plane, I went out and started taking photographs, and I met a guy on the street, and he's like, "Come into my house." I'm like, "Okay," kind of. And I'm a New Yorker. I was, raised very cautious. New York people don't invite you into their house. It's not like you walk on the street, "Hey, come on in here." He's taking me upstairs and through these planks and up to the roof. I'm like, I'm so getting rolled. I got all this equipment on me. My camera's gone, and he brings me up to the roof. He's like, "Look at the view." And we really didn't speak the same language, but I understood what he was saying. And he spent so much time with me. Then we went downstairs. He introduced me to his family, his friends, his neighbors. He brought out beers, and I was there for like 2 hours. And I'm like, this is the most magical experience I've ever had. And it was just, it blew me away. And I have never had, experiences quite like that before.
Yeah, Cuba's incredible. The people are amazing, big hearts. And, me and Steve have some really hilarious, but the first time we ever went, I wanted to go for my 25th birthday. And we definitely got lost the first time we went and had some crazy stories, but the Cuban people just pulled us right out of it. And honestly, we met some amazing friends from that first time. So
well, let's go into the next little series here that you've sent me.
So this is a series called Core Routine. I guess I should say that right if it's going to be a series, but it's a series that I started it's a FaceTime series that I started with my friends, hopefully to expand it eventually. But I basically wanted I've been having conversations with my friends about what they've been doing, obviously, and I wanted
And
to.
this is during all of this, right? This is recent.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
all during quarantine, or yeah, during COVID quarantine. Um, they're all these three girls that are gonna be in these photos are all my best friends in California. We initially, so it started with just asking them 5 questions about how their experience has been, basically listing emotions and telling me about what their typical routines are. And from that, I just chose a couple of our favorite ones, and I did a FaceTime shoot, and then I I was kind of over the FaceTime shoot idea, so I just wanted to find a way to make it different. So I
You're
basically
making
found,
these look like Polaroids, no?
well, they actually are physical Polaroids. I
Oh,
have,
so you, wow.
yeah, so I actually found a way to make them into Polaroids because being a film photographer, especially, we really are into the tangible things. So having that physical Polaroid is really meaningful for me.
It's given this wonderful timeless look. It's like I remember when I was young and I had one of my first cameras, and I was in Texas visiting my grandparents, and I would develop the 110, and it was like the most exciting thing possible. I didn't know if I was going to get any pictures back, but I remember going to the drugstore, dropping it off, and like, can we go pick it up yet? Can we go pick it up for days? And picking it up and kind of going through, and like half of them would be just terrible, and like I
Yeah.
had one or two that were fabulous, and it has that
Hey,
timeless feel to it,
all you need is that one or two to make you happy. It feels like when you open a pack of Pokemon cards and you get the
right?
one Charizard. All you need is the one Charizard, really. So this is Anna. Again, all my best friends. That she was hanging laundry in this shot. And actually, with the first two girls, we didn't have any. They were alone, so we had to like finagle the phone, and it was a mission in itself. But yeah, her hanging laundry was one of her things.
If you don't see the beautiful calmness to all these photos.
Now that you mention it, it does look pretty calm. So that's a really nice, some insight, some good feedback. And this is Pavi, my one of my many beautiful best friends, and one of her favorite things has just been reading. So
What were your main influences? Was it when you were growing up? Was it magazines? Was it movies? Was it TV? What kind of like really kind of guided you to a certain, to influence your style and what you were looking for?
I am extremely influenced by movies. I'm still to this day. I literally can just sit in my room and watch movies all day if I'm a homebody, so I could do that all day and not be bothered by it. I really love anime. I really love, Studio Gilby. You mentioned colors. The colors in Miyazaki's work is kind of inspirational, and a lot of magazines as well. I love photo books. I have a ton of photo books, a whole collection here. And really just my friends and my environment. Honestly, I'm inspired by just watching people on the train.
Yeah.
Things in New York always look like a movie, so it's easy to just pull inspiration from.
Yeah, I put on a pair of headphones and I'm just walking in my own cinema, in my own
Exactly.
every single day. So we're going to go into some of the other stuff that you've been shooting most recently.
Yeah, so most recently I started, Steve and I started attending some of the protests together, and we weren't on assignment at first. We just brought our cameras and we, as historians, we feel it's our duty to document what's going on in the world. So one of the things that this is just one of the shots that I got when I was on the front line. And these protests in general have been really powerful, really emotional, and something that I recommend everyone attend at least one if you are able to. Obviously, I know with COVID, it's not easy for everyone to and whatnot, but if you are, you should, because not everything, a lot of them have been really peaceful, and it's almost overwhelming the emotions you feel when so many people are united for the same cause and screaming the same things. And, we're all out here just trying to make the world better. So it's something that I think.
So you guys were going out together and shooting, or was it initially starting out together, or like how did you kind of coordinate that?
Yeah, so we did go together, but when me and Steve shoot, we're together at first, and then we end up splitting off, and we'll just share our location, and try to meet whenever we can, but
Yeah.
that's kind of how we always shoot.
Because I'm about to say your styles are different. And how would you describe the difference in the way you guys see?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can describe the difference in how we see, but I can say
Because if you come back at the end of the day and you compare photos, you're like, oh wow, there must be a conversation that had, like, you know, the way you saw it and the way he saw it.
oh yeah, I mean, it's always fun when we can come back together. After every time we go shoot, we come back, we send each other our folders, we talk about our images together and what we liked about them, and we always send each other our favorites. And it is interesting to see what each of us shot, but I feel like we're both drawn to the same things. You know, we're drawn to those, like, I can definitely say, especially with this photo, like those minimal moments that are just clear, speaks the message, and especially because it's black and white, it's it's something that Steve is a black and white photographer pretty much primarily now, but I'll let him speak for himself. But anyway, it's interesting to see also when we shoot at the same time or in the same place, the times that we get the same shots sort of, and we weren't even with each other. I love when that happens. And that actually happened a few times where we got the same sign or the same, you know, person doing something that was kind of similar and we weren't even together. So that is fun. And yeah.
I believe this is the final image that you had sent me. Why don't you finish it off? Tell me about this one.
So this was the first day of the protest, the first protest that I attended. And this is about, you know, you can see it's Blue Hour. The protests were peaceful throughout the whole day, but as it started getting darker, you could tell that people were getting rowdier and the tension was increasing. The temperature of, you know, people's emotions was increasing, and they were going head to head, you know, with the police. And I was looking at the people, you know, in the mix, and, you know, there's a lot of photographers around too. So for one, whenever there's a lot of photographers, I'm usually trying to get away from the photographers and try to find my own voice. So one of the people that I saw was this guy. He was standing on you can't see the railing, but he's standing on a railing, trying to get a better view of everything going on. I really loved the light on his face. It was, if you, in the image before of the cops, that red light of the numbers was reflecting on his face. Yeah, the image before this one. So that red light was reflecting on his face, and the way the Blue Hour was just behind him, and his chain was just hanging, and he was just watching peacefully, like observing what was going on. I was really drawn to the emotion in his eyes, and actually I have other photos. He ended up looking at me, and I didn't know it at the time, but he was staring directly at me for a minute. So, you know, we connected for that moment.
So in your lifetime, how many protests you've been to, and how is this one different for you, and the energy and the encompassing feeling of it, and the volatility at moments? So how has it been for you?
This is my, prior to this, I had only been to 2 protests. I went to a women's rights protest in New York a couple of years ago. And then I went to a LGBTQ one in LA. But, you know, the women's rights one was really powerful, but this is totally different. You know, the energy, we're talking about lives that have been taken by police, brutality, people that we paid to protect us. It's a really hurtful topic. Everything that's going on it's like, if I talk about it too much, I could literally cry, because it's really intense what's going on right now. And this monumental shift of what's happening, it's, you know, the catalyst is not only the fact that this George Floyd was murdered, and Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and of course all the other hundreds of people.
It's overwhelming, because when I was kind of leading up to talk about tonight, and in my own experiences, and granted, I've seen some more stuff than you have, just for being a little bit older than both of you, but and growing up in the city, the amount of names, and that the same thing just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating is overwhelming. And I started to write down these names, and it became so overwhelming that, like, it was like every single year from, you know, for decades and decades and decades and hundreds of years. And it was
every single month, probably every single day, honestly, somewhere around the world. And but I was going to say, actually, another interesting variable to all this is the catalyst of being in COVID. You know, a lot of people are unemployed. We're all coming together because we have the ability to come together. So this is just intensified even more because of all of these insane things that are happening. And finally, people are waking up. And, you know, we were talking about, we were talking a little earlier about this. You know, we're in phase 1 now of the COVID going back to normal of things. And we're also in phase 1 of the awakening of what's going on in the world with racism. And it's unfortunate that it took this long, but I'm just happy that people are starting to wake up to it. And, you know, including myself, there's a lot of things that I'm learning, you know, as quote unquote woke as I thought I was. There's so many things that I've absorbed, and a lot of, you know, nights that I've just spent in silence, laying in my bed, just thinking like, what can I do to, you know, make this situation better? And like, what is my role in all of this to help, you know? And a lot of it has been research and learning. I've been watching a lot of films on just things, you know, I Am Not Your Negro with James Baldwin I watched it today. There's a lot of things that you're like, wow, history just continues to repeat itself, and you have to know history in order to understand the gravity of the situation. So
there's so many conversations to be had, and hopefully that, you know, this is, you know, I think I talked about it last time on Open Talk, that you know, this was sort of the perfect storm. You know, suddenly, you know, everybody is in self-isolation and watching TV, and nobody's working, and everybody sees something on TV at once, and everybody kind of feels it at once, and it travels the world so quickly. And then suddenly everybody protests at once. And there was a one voice that finally came out. And I don't think if it weren't for COVID happening and people being at home and this video hitting, it may not have had the same gravity. It would have been just another video and everybody coming desensitized. And you almost have to think, there's good that came out of this, the COVID, that, you know, it's horrible that people are dying and sick, and the economy and stuff like that. But if you can look at this and it actually brings about the dialogue and the change in the world, then it's pretty much worth every second of it.
Yeah, I do agree. You know, it's unfortunate what COVID has caused, but it's also, you know, also awoken a lot of really positive things. You know, the world just kind of started going down when Kobe died. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, my favorite basketball player of all time. So just gotta take it one day at a time.
So now we're Steve Sweatpants, we're gonna jump over to you, and we're gonna talk to you a little bit, right? So, where were you born?
So I was born in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, and I was raised in Rosedale, Jamaica, Queens, which is like southeast, right in the swamp, right by Jamaica Bay. So like when I was growing up, like Concords was flying over my house and all that stuff, and our pictures used to shake off the wall.
What year was that when you were born?
I was born in '87, so
87. So for you in New York, you know, from like, I know that you and I kind of have similar kind of inspiration being artists. I think it's from what I feel, and I may be wrong enough, and that's what this conversation that we're going to have kind of really kind of brings us together. And what did your parents do?
My dad was a master's electrician and a contractor, so he ran his own business. So he had a business called Irby Electric. He had that for about 35 years. My mom was a paralegal, and she worked in the legal department for the she worked a bunch of different kind of jobs over the time, but like she went from as working in like Birch, the school of Birch, which was like a secretary, as a secretary in like the Jewish schools that's right behind the St. John's College, and then she started working back in the legal department again, and she was over there at the immigration court for years. So my parents have definitely been like the nuclear family that people typically just don't understand. Like, yeah, though they have real ass jobs. You know what I mean? Like they just worked really hard at doing those jobs.
Yeah. And the family dynamic, did you have a large family, small family?
Oh, huge family. So my mom is, I just have one sibling. My little sister, she's not even that little no more. She's younger, so she's actually a grown woman. But yeah, so my little sister Lauren is my only other sibling, but we come from a big family of my mom came from six siblings, and my dad came from 5 siblings. So I have so many aunts and uncles and cousins and, you know, grandparents and all that kind of stuff. So the family barbecues and like Saturdays, everybody used to hang out at our house every Saturday. So anytime there was like a new, like the Mike Tyson fight, or like, you know, the new Nintendo 64 game, or just us playing basketball or anything like that, like people always came to my house on the weekends.
Now, I think as our conversation goes here, there's so many things that led into you and Street Dreams, and the meaning behind Street Dreams, I think, is going to be extremely layered, and it comes from the people that you've associated with, the people you grew up with, the people that you idealize, the message that you want to get out there. So let's kind of dive into some of those before we talk about Street Dreams, the magazine. I would assume very early on, community and music was a driving force for you. No?
It was the music part for sure, but it was like almost like you said, it's a very layered thing. The music was pretty much like the last part of it. It was the biggest part was when we first created Street Dreams. I guess
I'm going way before Street Dreams. I'm talking about you as a person. Like, what influenced you as a child? Like, was it music or like?
So even like as a child, like growing up was a humongous influence. You know what I mean? Like growing up, like I was in the orchestra. I played the cello. I played the cello and violin. Played the saxophone. Like when I was taught to play the saxophone by a Black Panther when I was like in the 4th grade. You know what I mean? Like my parents were really adamant on me using my hands since my dad was a tradesman and being an electrician. So I've been working on job sites since I've been like 9 years old as an electrician, and at the same time like being on the electrical field with him, like legit, like from like learning how to like splice things up with him, and then I would be playing like the saxophone by like the afternoon and stuff like that. So music was a really big part of my my growth, and also like the community aspect of growing up in like in a really religious family and understanding like the dichotomy of just how it is to growing up in like in the church life, and understanding even if you don't have the same beliefs, you understand the spirituality and the connectivity of what you're trying to establish. And I really respected that when I was growing up, and coming from a big family, like this was before the internet, so we actually hung out with each other. So we would play like we would play basketball and be sweaty for hours, and then go home and then like eat cereal for days and then pass out. That was pretty much my whole life.
Did you find that your influences early on were coming from like different types of music instead of or was it music and TV and film, or was one weighed more than the other in your life?
Music was a huge part of it, but also I was a big nerd, so I played a lot of video games and read a lot of comic books. Playing a lot of video games, you don't really understand how much of an influence of like camera angles and like color patterns and like even more about story building and how they control a narrative. Video games is one of the best ways of storytelling, because you're in control of the narrative and you control the story. So same thing with comic books, which are basically just storyboards for cinema, film, and anything like that. I think a lot of people that I certainly read a bunch of comic books when I was younger, and the cinema was very important to me. Do you remember what kind of music that you? What would be on your what was it, CDs for you, or what was it? I'm old, so I actually know what it was like.
I'm older, man. I had tape decks and 8 tracks and.
Yeah, you old. But the tape cassette, I definitely remember buying like the first thing I bought on a tape cassette was like the Nutty Professor soundtrack, and I bought that at Woolworths, like on my Walkman and stuff like that. So I have like a really big connectivity with music, and my parents being super religious growing up, they didn't want me to listen to hip hop, so I had to really go on like some real discovery. And my dad was always a very eclectic dude, so like dad would be like the Black dude listening to like Billy Joel and Rod Stewart and like other randomness, and then but my mom was like soulful, and she was from Brownsville.
Did you find yourself going to friends' houses and listening to one collection, and at home you'd own a different collection, or did you have those at home and you just kept them hidden? Or
I had no shame. My parents brought me up like having like no fear. So they actually like embraced those things. So like it's like why you hiding the fact that you like Billy Joel? Like if you like the song, then you like the song, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So like my parents were really big on adamant on that when I was growing up. So I never really felt like to hide anything. If anything, I was hiding the fact that I was being religious anytime until I got a little bit older. But like music wise and like taste wise and video games and everything, it was a fully embracing environment. And I think that really helped me, become older to be way more accepting of pretty much, anything and everything, as long as it's not offensive towards like me and my family.
Yeah. So where did the camera first come into play?
I didn't really start diving into cameras until I was 25. My only real experience with cameras to that point was I used to be really into like the streetwear community scene. I still am really into the streetwear community scene, especially growing up in New York. Everybody wants to be different. I've been really big into sneaker culture because growing up in New York, you didn't want to have a pair of dusty sneakers going to school. So these things are like our own kind of metrics of,
Yeah.
where you are, like, culturally, and also as a sense of discovery of like, something that's cool. So going into the streetwear game, it was kind of like slowly falling into the tech game as well too.
Were you
And
in the whole skater thing and skater fashion and
I
sneakers and all
never, I
that
never
kind of
did
stuff?
skateboard in my life. I mean, I've been to the Brooklyn Banks once, and I tried to get on a skateboard and rip my pants. So I was like, that was it for me.
So,
I
so
played Tony Hawk Pro
KCDC and in the, was not a thing for you?
No, but I was into bikes. Like, anything that was like, safe, I was down with that.
Were you familiar with KCDC? Did you know them as a shop or anything like that?
No, not to be honest, no. But there was a shop in Queens that we used to go to. Nigel Sylvester is like a really prominent BMX biker now. He had a shop back in Queens that was by Queens Center Mall that we all used to go to. That was like, it was a big deal for him because he was like a black BMXer, like who was signed to Nike, and that was like early 2000s, and that was weird back then. And now he's like pretty much like one of the.
So KCDC was definitely before your time, and it was in Brooklyn, and it was in a time and place where they had, no one was really out there. You had, just the artists starting to move out there, and you had the Hasidics and stuff like that. But KCDC really, it's the first place they put a ramp in their store. They opened up a gallery. They did concerts there. They used to have, it used to spill out onto the streets and have barbecues. And it was a time and place where this doesn't exist anymore. And I feel that was almost like that's the early version of Street Dreams to me. Is that that feel, and it'd be cool for you to kind of check that out. So you didn't get a camera really as part of your mindset until 25. What were you thinking before that? Where were you going? What direction were you going before photography?
I mean, I was still. I'm not saying I was lost, but I definitely had this sense of like, I just wanted to really like,
Dude, I was lost till 45. I still have issues.
I'm probably still lost now. I'm just lying for the camera, honestly. But like, there was a real sense of like, I had to find like a sense of purpose, honestly. And like, I was really in the discovery stage. Around that age, like I was working at GameStop for super long, and like, it was weird. I worked at the GameStop on 14th Street in Union Square and 34th Street. So if anybody knows about those locations, like I was in the thick of it, of everything, honestly. So it was a really interesting times in my life. And I just remember my pops always used to be on my, on my behind, telling me like, don't live to pay your rent. And I never really understood what that meant until I started to get older. Like he actually liked being an electrician. Like he liked, playing around with circuit breakers and like, banging rods into the ground and stuff like that. And I couldn't fathom it. But then once I understood, like, I just had this kind of logic of like, I like video games, so let me work at GameStop. He's like, oh, like I need to get like, an easy Metro card, let me work at REI. And then after I got that mindset out of my head, I started to actually do things that was, investing into my own, like, personal wealth and like, personal growth. It actually became way better than me. So I actually stumbled upon Instagram while I was working at GameStop, and that was pretty much it after that. That was like,
so what was the first camera you got in your hands, and like, if you remember, and what was your kind of path into photography?
The first camera I got in my hands at the time was like a Nikon D5100, I believe. It was like it's like some bullshit camera that I got from something that I really don't care for, honestly. Because back before I really decided to do like this whole photography thing seriously, I was like an A&R for a rapper, and this rapper stuff. But like, it was an interesting experience because like, at the time, like he wasn't a bad artist and like, making bad music, and it was more or less like a kind of like discovery thing, like of me trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. And I found out like that was like the last bit of reassurance to know that I don't want to chase anybody else's dream. Like I want to chase something that I actually believe in. So, I was able to like have to drive from Brooklyn to Texas and back going to South by Southwest to kind of figure out that I don't want to do that anymore, which was one of the work why I don't drive anymore. But that trip kind of like really enlightened my whole path. Was like, no, I want to take this photography stuff really seriously. And I got fired from REI around the same time too. So it was like, all right, now I have no other excuses but to go like completely forward with it. So I had to get pretty much pushed out the nest in order to, fly, if you will.
So what was it? What was the road that first took you kind of into photography? I mean, you knew you liked it at a certain point, and how did you get involved with it? I mean, what was the real kind of catalyst, and how did you get from one part of your world into actually shooting as a professional photographer?
mean, one of the early gigs that like I started to notice I was like taken seriously, like one of my other early cameras I had was the Canon Rebel XSN. It's like the silver little film camera. I bought it off Amazon for like $15 at the time, and then I bought a 40mm pancake lens, and I was still kind of like learning how to like compose photos with like my iPhone and using Instagram and like trying to get like my rhythm down, if you will. And then with the film camera, because I didn't want to be a poser, because I hate posers, I wanted to actually learn like, an aesthetic and understand what I was really trying to accomplish. And I did a couple of different things. I took a crazy road trip with my parents from like Denver to Las Vegas, and like that was like the first time I actually shot a roll of film. And then I was able to like document my parents and my sister and my mom and my pops, like, on this road trip, which is now coming to find out was like one of my favorite photos I still took to this day. And that was like probably like 6-7 years ago now. And then another experience is after I stopped, working with the rapper dude and like, started to find my own kind of path. Like I got a free gig to work with Mass Appeal at the time, and just like taking photos for like this hip hop magazine where, I'm a hip hop head. I grew up in New York. So like, this is a magazine that Nas partially owns. And it's a big deal for me because Street Dreams is a Nas song. So there was this weird kind of meta experience where like, even though this gig is free and I'm actually in the hole now because I shot this thing, it's like, this shit is real. So like, let me actually, take it a little bit more seriously. And
So was photography a way for you to kind of bridge these worlds together? I mean, what initially, what drew you to the image and you creating an image and you saying, hey, I really want to actually create images and share my voice?
I think it's a weird way of telling the truth, and like it's like new age folk tales. And I think at the end of the day, and not to say that like everybody's perfect and stuff like that, but photography is a very truthful kind of way of like documenting what's going on. So I just got addicted to that sense of control, because at the same time, like I've been in situations where I've never been in control in my life, where I'm working at some certain kind of jobs or whatever kind of things are happening to you. Like photography gave me that sense of control where I can not only like tell the truth from what I see from my perspective, but if somebody else is receptive towards it, I could actually share it. So it was like this weird kind of like ecosystem that you're building into a thing where like as therapeutic as it is for you is also something that you can share with somebody, with anyone who actually really cares for it. So I just really got, really obsessed with that fact. And like the deeper that I got into that sense, I got really upset, into the whole idea that I'm documenting it as a historian about what's going on in my life as a Black dude born and raised in New York. I mean, all that stuff holds so much weight to it once you develop some kind of consistency.
So how, now that you're finding success and at pretty young age, from someone that wasn't really kind of going to photography at 25 and getting noticed, how did you find that path of staying true to the voice and still working for big products and not being called like, oh, he's shooting stuff for Prada now, what a sellout? It's like how do you keep it honest and stuff like that? Because looking at the Prada thing, from what I'm seeing is like you're flying over in a helicopter, which is beautiful, but you're showing the projects, and it's something that looked like Marcy House, where Jay-Z grew up. And it's like is this an intentional thing that you're kind of keeping true, or is it this?
It's super intentional. Like I kind of I'm very stubborn. If you know anything about me, so I stubbornly try to tell the brands like they need to. The way to actually build brand loyalty and actually communicate with these things is telling truthful narratives. Like why would I start? Like one of the things I started to notice, and like because I've been on Instagram for a long time now, is that people's pages started to slowly turn into like a back page of a newspaper. And I've really stayed true to what I want to document and want to communicate on my brand that actually means something in my life. So I don't talk about shit I don't want to talk about, pretty much. So I've done that for so long that like, it builds like this kind of brand identity and some kind of integrity to my product, so that anything that I do talk about is coming from a level of, no, he's actually, uses these things, or he's actually taking part of it. Like whether it's a chocolate bar or if it's Prada, or if, it could be a toilet, I'm going to actually use these products to let you know that I'm endorsing it, because I don't want to talk about shit I don't want to talk about. So like I found finding a ways to communicate that truthfully through photos is the fun part, because, after playing so many video games and watching films and, just growing up in New York, I know, and working a bunch of retail, honestly, I know what somebody wants to buy pretty much within 30 seconds. And I know the minute that you try to sell somebody something, is over. But I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. I'm just trying to tell you, like, this is what I think about it, and this is how I perceive it. And if you dig it, that's great. If you don't, man, like, honestly, like, then don't buy it. Don't stress yourself out. Like, it's not the end of the world.
which leads me into our first video of the night. And it kind of sums you up and shows your playfulness and how seriously you take it and how much enjoyment you get out of photography. So we're going to go actually to a video now. So sit back for a second, guys, and enjoy this.
What is up, everybody? What's good? What's up? It doesn't have to be the most extraordinary shot or situation every time. It's just the documenting process. And I've been obsessed with the documenting process because if we take it into our own kind of context, we can make a lot with it. I'm always a sucker for a location like this. I want somebody to do like something crazy, like somebody playing like a saxophone. I wake up early every single day, 7 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I have like nightmares. I hear my dad tell me like, Steven, wake up! Kind of like to like just observe all the kind of like other things that are around me too that kind of help pass the time. So, oh, shit. Came too fast. Give you no sign. Like, when I first get into a situation, I try to like observe like how grand or how minimal the situation is. You have this life situation going on, you have these kind of people here. And once you kind of check off all the things that you can do and you can't do mentally, I then get really comfortable and try to figure out what I can do within that space. You circle your prey a little bit and then just kind of see like a good point of attack and then you start attacking. I just want that one person walking into the light. I just need one. Hello? Gotcha. Like everything in my life is like a game to me to kind of figure out and scheme situations where, like, this is the most relatable situation in the most unrelatable place. Oh, look at the exchange. Look at that. Look at that. The A Paulie. Hey, Paulie. You playing games? You playing games? I'm out of here. Scram. I always found myself gravitating towards the moments though, of like these Shakespearean themes of like timelessness, of like everybody knows what it feels like to do like these normal day-to-day things. Report sneakers are on the wire. And there are some Jordans. If you know anything about me, you know that I have too many pairs of sneakers. That's tight, that's tight. Did you put them there? I know you did. See, he's trying to be funny. That's why he put his dirty sneakers up there. It's random, it's genuine, it's difficult. All those kind of weird like tricks of life and like, dark humor moments. The street photography is riddled with things like that. There's a dad walking with his daughter on his shoulders in the midst of all this traffic. I used to look at family photos and I used to, remember being that child on my pop's shoulders or hanging out with my mom or on the couch. So like being able to catch this father with his daughter is just one of those dope things that makes it feel real. And I empathize with that 300%.
I think that's a pretty fun way to sum you up there.
I'm a nerd.
It's awesome. What is it that kind of drives you to tell a story, and what are you looking for? Is it do you find yourself what makes you happiest as a photographer?
I mean, I guess what makes me happiest as a photographer is just finding ways to really communicate, like, the climate of what's going on without being so obvious. I think people are just begrudgingly wanting to know all the details all the time, but I think there is a beauty in discovery that photography gives you that you don't have to have all the answers and you can interpret it for yourself. So I just don't like people having shit that's easy all the time, because nothing's in my life that easy all the time. So photography is that sense of discovery, and like, that truthfulness of it is something that's really important. And I try to translate all the time, but I don't try to overcomplicate it, but I still want it to be like this kind of balance of like discovery, but the simplicity once you understand it, like, oh, I can relate to that.
A lot of people always want to label a photographer. You're a street photographer, you're a portrait photographer. And as photographers, I think we deep at the heart, we just want to be photographers and capture what moves us. Do you label yourself, and what are the labels that you try and fight against?
I mean, if I have to label myself because I have to talk to a client, then I will, but I typically don't like labels. If I were to pick a label of anything, I would just like to say I'm a documentarian, because at the end of the day, I'm just taking photos and trying to capture it, whether it's on on a gig or whether it's for myself, I'm just trying to capture the most truthful way, and maybe my own kind of little jokes and hidden in the photo or something like that. But I'm still trying to capture it as truthfully and beautifully and empowering as I can. So when it's all said and done, when you look through it, he's like, oh, it doesn't feel like something that was cynical. I don't want to leave any kind of cynicism in my work.
So that's a good way to segue into some of the photos you sent me, you're saying you're a documentarian. So let's dive into this very first shot that we would have all expected from you.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. I love being random. That's my thing. So this first photo is actually during the time where recently when, we could travel without, thinking to get the cooties. But this is when we were in Japan for a month. Jess and I were out in Japan we flew out on September 11th, but anyway.
Yes, I remember that. We missed her for a whole month. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Kidnapped her. Sorry, my bad. But yeah, we were out in Japan. Japan for pretty much like a whole month from September 11th to October 9th. And this is the first time. That's probably like, besides being in like some other places like within the States, that's the longest I've been outside of New York in my whole life, to be honest. So it was just a crazy experience in general, and just being accustomed to the culture because I've been obsessed with Japanese culture and fashion and the movies and like the food. Literally anything. I'm pretty much want to be Steven-san. I've been obsessed with it forever. So being able to
I'm the exact same way, and I haven't been there yet. It's so high on my bucket list. You have no, and in fact, this year I was going there, but it had to be canceled.
Yeah, understandable. I have to see why, but honestly, like just that whole trip alone was just such a blessing to be there. I was there because of Astro Gaming got to let us fly out a little bit early, so just definitely shout outs to Astro Gaming. Those are my really good friends who are tech people and make great headphones. But so that time I got to go see the sumo fight, and we were actually caught them right in season because there was only maybe about a week left and change. And I grew up obsessed with wrestling and like video games and like playing Street Fighter and E Honda and all that kind of stuff. Like just like being able to actually wanted to see it and experience it in real time was a huge goal of mine. So one of my friends who who works for Complex, who's a sneaker, he reviews sneakers. He goes by Brendan Dunn. He hit me up in the morning. He was like, "Hey man, like, would you be willing to go watch some sumo matches?" And I'm like, "You do not have to ask me twice." So I traded some Tokyo Game Show tickets with him so he can go see like the E3 of Tokyo with us.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
He gave us the scoop on the sumo thing, and we went to go see it together and document it. And it was fucking sick.
What was the one? We've all watched kind of these sumo things. What was the one thing that kind of took you by surprise being there? Like, that was like, wow, you walked away with. I never would have thought that, or never would have realized it, or.
I believe that they said, like, don't quote me on the exact number, but there's 76 ways to take down in sumo, which are the proper ways to actually do it. So they're not just like, running against each other and throwing their weight. There's actual tactful ways that they're doing it that they get points, which really kind of blew my mind. That there is like, not only like, it's not just random people just throwing against each other, like how it's like, some sock and bopping kind of thing.
There's a true studied art form. Yeah.
It's a whole deep history and culture. So being able to go and
how revered they are as athletes.
They're just pretty much like the Greek gods, you know what I mean? Like and then seeing them even like walking outside of like, of the spot was just like, a crazy moment. I definitely chased one down to get an autograph and
awesome.
Magazine. But it's honestly probably easily one of the best experiences of my life, hands down. So
let's go into the next photo here.
This is earlier this year with Bleacher Report. This is actually Derrick Rose, formerly from the Chicago Bulls, the youngest NBA MVP ever, and now currently on the Detroit Pistons. Bleacher Report is one of my clients that I've worked with for the past couple of years because I'm a sports fanatic and I love the Knicks. Unfortunately, I might have to change my team because
it's painful. It's painful.
Yeah, I honestly, like, the Brooklyn Nets. What's up? But anyway, Derrick Rose is one of my favorite basketball players to watch when I was growing up because he was just an incredible athlete and an explosive point guard. And I never thought I would have an opportunity to photograph him and like hang out with him for the day. But this was in Detroit when it was really cold and like cold Detroit day in the middle of like this kind of like church, not a dilapidated church, but it definitely could have used a little bit more of an upkeeping, but they did what they can with the space, and they brought Derrick Rose in there, and we actually set up these 3 heaters for him because the spot was really cold, and he's like, man, Derrick Rose is the multimillionaire, this dude won the NBA MVP, like maybe we should get him some heaters. As soon as we got into the room, as soon as he came into the room, he saw the heaters. He's like, man, why are these heaters here? Get these out of here. I was like, oh man, normal ass dude. So we had a great shoot, and he's really cool, and like he signed my Knicks jersey, and I told him he's one of the best Knicks players we've ever had. And he started.
What's it like going from, kind of growing up, just as a normal kid in New York, and then suddenly kind of meeting idols and meeting people? Like, I mean, at one point you just kind of walk in and say, no, I have to act normal because this is a normal event. But at the same time, like meeting idols and stuff like that, how do you juggle that experience? Because I know I shoot a lot of celebrities and stuff like that, and for me it's like, it's like they just treat them like normal people, and it's like, but when you meet someone that you really look up to, how does that play into your mindset?
No, you definitely. I'm a human being, so I definitely still get nervous. Like my stomach gets a little queasy sometimes. Like, oh shit, like here we go. But it's not really nervous because of meeting them. Is more or less nervous because I have a job to do, and I want to crush my job, and I want to make sure that like people know that I'm here for a reason. So
the funniest thing is, I think the funniest thing is like we've done this a million times before, but to still get nervous, like I don't want to fuck this up, is a real feeling that you have before these, and I think it's just because if you ever kind of give that up, you don't care.
Exactly. If you don't really get nervous, I mean, I'm not to say like I don't feel confident, but like once I start getting my flow in, like I'll be fine. Like I'm nervous as shit before I start everything. Like there's so many things. Your brain just like my brain. I'm a very active thinker, so I'm over analytical over things that I don't need to overanalyze until I actually need to get there.
Yeah. So let's move into the next photo here.
So I've been taking a lot of these photos like out of my window from my apartment in Bed-Stuy during like when the COVID-19 really first hit the streets. And this is right when they were shutting down all the stores and everybody really had to buy like all the groceries and all the toilet paper and everything like that. And I hit up Oliver from B&H because he's one of my good friends. Thank God for Oliver. And I asked him if it's possible if I can borrow a 7200 for the time to document some things. Because I'm not buying that right now. And they were gracious enough to lend it to me, and so I'll be able to document some things during everything while everything was going down. So I mean, I just think pictures like this, the test of time, like these are like one of these photos are like I would never post to Instagram or or share anything like that. But like when I'm started collecting like my documentation of work and of what it was like and for real, like this is the stuff that helps me build my story in the end. So like, look how damn bags that was. It's insane,
Amazing.
Like,
so going into, I know that obviously Jessica and I had started talking about the realization of COVID because we were trying to program for our community with APA and events and stuff like that. But what was your kind of realization and transition from going into I'm working and I have jobs to wait, this is a flu, no wait, it's not a flu, wait, we have to self-isolate? What was this transition going on in your mind?
It was one of the transitions that went on my mind is that I since I've been naturally a busybody for so long and been bouncing around and just working on a bunch of different projects that kind of pop up individually and with Street Dreams, this is the first time I ever had no reason to procrastinate on any of the shit I actually had to do. So I actually went into the bunker and then worked 10 times harder to make sure that we released the website, make sure we released the radio. I mean, like that was probably the best time. I mean, I never got so much shit done in my life, honestly. Like I've been able to execute so many things that have been on the back burner that I've got more done in the span of 3 months than what we've done in 5 years of Street Dreams, to be honest with you. So that was a great time for me. I mean, I'm always half glass full with these kind of situations. And sometimes people probably hate talking to me because I'm too like, no, let's get on it. Let's work, man. Because like, what the hell else? You have nothing else to do. So
you've kind of built a community and a lot of people that follow Street Dreams and a lot of people that look at you kind of as leaders and what's going on in the community. What were the conversations you found in the beginning you were having with people about, COVID and the message that was coming down from, like, say, the administration to the local level to the community level, and how did that alter to what we're going through today?
I mean, it was a really hard blow for the community. I mean, it's still like we still trying to figure out how we actually have been holding up with it. To be honest with you, there's a lot of it's a full spectrum of emotions. So I mean, I know that like my personality kind of beats a little bit different in these situations, but I don't try to look at anybody or look down on anyone if they're feeling down in the dumps with it, because it's a lot to take in. One of my best friends, AJ's father passed away because of this, and he was one of the people that worked in the medical field that got denied 3 times, and they still, unfortunately passed away from it. And then his mother got it like 2 weeks after it, and then, hopefully I'm glad that she recovered and fought through it. But this is real time, this is real time shit with that I've been dealing with friends from that's the guy who introduced me to Eric and Mike in the first place to start Street Dreams. So
Wow.
He's pretty much as connected to me as the start of our whole company. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it in the full spectrum, but I don't believe in being stagnant. Period. And I think that, obviously it doesn't mean you need to move right now, but you have to find tactful ways to keep it moving.
Was this photo taken during the whole self-isolation, or was this pre or post? Or
Well, I wish. This was pre-isolation. This was on the Nike. I got contracted by Nike to work the New York versus New York campaign, which is this interborough basketball tournament that they have all the different inner city hoods that never get a chance, so Gershwin Park in East New York, they have Dykeman up in Manhattan, they have all these different parks. So this is actually East New York, and this kid, I was documenting the kid and his father, which is right behind him in the gray Nike shirt, and this whole day was pretty much this is a really cool day to see a father and son interacting, just hanging out with each other, and then my everything that's been going on and in just people's lives and stuff like that. It's just always interesting to see being able to tell the truthful narrative of a black father taking care of his kid during a Nike campaign, which is the most honest.
So this is a campaign shot, but it's a documentary kind of feel to it. So how much of this was just you're going to show up and shoot this, and how much is set up? And talk about how you find a shot, because I mean, obviously, was the water there? Did you just say, oh wow, look at the reflection? How did you get to this shot?
The water was definitely there, and the way that I've been being stubborn and being stubborn in my ways for a long time has allowed me a lot of creative freedom. When I started to work with brands like the Nikes and the Bleacher Reports and all that stuff, they give me full creative freedom. They literally just let me do what the hell I want to do. And at the same time, what they have is they have a videographer, a cinematographer that's there, that they're capturing kind of the elements that they want to get. And then, then I will I will either shoot while they're doing their thing, and I'll find in my little pockets, the situation, the videographer was, shooting something. I cropped the photo, but if you were to see it a little bit, maybe 12 feet, a little bit further to the back, the videographer, cinematographer team is there with the boomsticks and all that good stuff. But I'm shooting with the 7200 because I found the puddle towards the back of the park, because I'm trying to find something different. And every time I shoot a shot, and not to say every time, it's a sharing process. So the video team sees what I was shooting, they'd be like, oh, that's tight, and they would probably see if they could emulate something like that. Or sometimes the video team would run. There's a lot of these situations where they do these really tight group huddles, and the video team is running up right in the middle. I'm the guy running in the last kind of scraps, you know what I mean, like that. So it's an interesting kind of give and take situation with the Nike shoes. But they give
so when you're doing a shoe like this, I mean, you're not so much is based on this money and pulling something out. You're going on basically faith that you're going to find a shot, and nothing is set up. So, I mean, that must be a different type of pressure to constantly deal with those type of variables.
I look at it as a relief. I was I don't want to be given a mood board, I especially if I know that's the beauty of coming in, and having a consistency in your work and understanding what you really want to communicate with, what you want to do. Not to say that I love seeing references and talking about understanding what the overall goal is, but I think if you're hiring a photographer, you're hiring me for a reason, and let me actually, if you need to get these shots, I definitely get these shots for you and knock it out. We'll never argue back and forth about something like that.
Yeah.
But the best shots I always get is the ones that I can create. And then those are the ones that they always gravitate towards too in the first place. So that's why they always give me that kind of creative freedom, because I don't want to have the structure with me, because the structure feels like I'm being put inside of another box that I don't want to be put in the first place.
Right. So let's move into these next series of shots. And why don't you tell me about these?
So this is right peak COVID season, and everybody's kind of going completely Looney Tunes. And we really want to figure out, I've really wanted to figure out a way to, just shows a sense of freedom in the street, because like, you know, they're closing everything down. Everybody's scared to go outside, even though you can go outside. There was a lot of these different kind of narratives that were going around. I wanted to show something that felt like freedom and power. So I have a friend that was a really like a semi-pro BMX rider, which his name is Chad Douglas, and he always posts different kind of videos. And one of the videos that he had posted up on his IG story one day is of all like these kind of dirt bike and ATV riders in like Canarsie. I told him as soon as I saw that video, I hit him up immediately. I was like, man, you need to put me in contact with these dudes. He's like, this guy is actually like one of my older friends who told me how to like, you know, ride motorcycles and all this ride bicycles and all that kind of stuff like that. So I linked up with them one day. It took about a week and change to do so. I brought you know, Raheem with me, Just with me, and one of my friends, Joe Cav, with me. And then we went to, I told them that let's just like go across the bridge and document them, like, you know, just riding across the city, because nobody else is, you know, going to tell us to do anything right now. So
these are they're not street legal, and you're taking a chance that, but assuming that
we were riding past police,
police are just not at this point not going to do anything. They're going to like, you know what, this is not the time for us to pull over these.
Anything. They didn't even sweat.
They're doing wheelies past police. They did not care.
Not to snitch on ourselves, but we definitely were past 4 lights, and then like we were doing our thing all down Myrtle and Broadway, over the Williamsburg Bridge and back twice.
So how are you following these people, and like in terms of like, are you on another bike? Are you, you know, a car? Are you running in tow? Or
well, when in particular, I was actually in the street. We were just standing in the street towards the end of the session. We probably rode with him for about an hour, but we were in my friend Raheem's car. We were shooting out the window, so I was hanging out the sunroof. You know, I thought I lost my camera. I was shooting with the 7200 hanging out the car, going like
getting some use out of that lens.
The things. I mean, I'm skinny too, so it's tough. It was definitely. We needed that. I mean, it felt like we was on a roller coaster. I never screamed. We were screaming so loud. It felt like we was on Nitro at Six Flags.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a cool image and such a cool, you know, place to see something that you normally wouldn't see something like that. You know, it's a great capture.
We needed that. We really, at that point, we needed something to spice up our lives, and that was definitely fun.
So let's move into another type of. These are obviously. Why don't you tell me about this, because you were there?
Yeah, this is on May 30th. This is on the day of one of like the early couple of days of the protest. This is at Union Square, and right around the time, like, as soon as the sun starts to go down, like the whole energy of the whole crowd changes. And the way I like to label it is like, you know, people were complaining about the looters and like, you know, people throwing shit and all that stuff like that. I would just label them as opportunists, you know. Yeah. There's going to be 95% of the people there are there for positivity. There's going to be a 5 to 10% chance that you will have opportunists to do anything that they want to do. So that there is obviously a mix of emotions of a full spectrum, where there's things that we're fighting for that is everything that we need at that time. And then there's going to be a couple of people that are just going to be there fighting their own fight, if you will.
Yeah, and I think people think this is new. I mean, if you look back, I know when I was young and watching live on TV, you know, the LA riots, you know, and Rodney King and the amount of violence and the days of, you know, of the Koreans on top of their stores with guns guarding their stores, and people that were getting killed. You know, I think there were 50 people killed during those riots, and the amount of damage, and, you know, and you look at this, yes, this is terrible, and that there were looters and stuff like that, but this seems different to me. And there, how does have you been in any other protests? Like, do you have a point of reference? Like, because I've
been to the trip when Trayvon Martin was killed. I went to because I was working at the GameStop on 14th Street. So when that happened, the protest happened, I literally walked outside of the store, and then there was as many people, and then as from the store entrance to the other side of the street, and it filled all the way down both sides of the avenue. It was people everywhere. There was people on top of the horse at that time. You know what I mean? The energy over here was definitely like there's a lot of stuff that's going on along with these protests, because not only are people protesting, but like you have people that have been pent up in their houses for 4 months that haven't had a chance to leave their house. So that's what I was saying. Like, it's hard to label it as an anarchist or as like a skater or as a looter or as a scammer or as an undercover cop or anything like that. It's literally opportunist. Yeah. That percentage of people have their own goal and they have their own thing going on. And then that was a real reflection of that night of just how crazy it could turn.
Yeah. So this series was run in New Yorker magazine, correct?
Yeah. So
And
that was
how did that come about? Were you commissioned for this, or they saw your photos and contacted you? How did this work come about?
I was commissioned by the New Yorker because after I posted the photos from when we dressed myself and we bumped into so many people that day on the 30th. A lot of us were starting to get reached out to from different publications for photojournalist agreements to run the images that we were capturing. So when I was reached out to the New Yorker, I actually was like the same day. I mean, they reached out to me. It was the same day I had to shoot the photos. I opened it up 2 hours before I actually had to go out to the shoot. When I saw the DM, there's like, hey, can you call me immediately? And when I called them, it's like, hey man, we saw your images. We loved your images. Would it be possible if you can go on assignment tonight? And that was the first night that they started curfew. And I was like, well, damn, there's a bedtime tonight. I'm not trying to get beat with a stick, So I had to call my mother and verified with my mother to make sure this is cool. And
Yeah.
Then
what was the conversation? Were they looking for something, or were they just wanted your photos? So was it do what you want to do, or were they looking for an angle, or?
No, they wanted me to do the same thing. They had the creative freedom to do what I want to do, but be mindful of what the writer. I was with the writer as well too, Emily Witt. So shout out to Emily Witt. She wrote an incredible story also. I was with her, and she had some people, points of interest of people that she wanted to, photograph and things that to look out for. But there was definitely the creative freedom to do what I want to do. The reason why they really went crazy is because after GQ posted GQ reached out to me to commission my photo of what I took on the 31st, and once GQ posted, I got pretty much picked up onto Vanity Fair, the New Yorker, ID France. Digital photo. We're working on the thing. There's a bunch of publications that started to reach out at the same time. But that GQ thing really was the one to set it off. And then going into the New Yorker thing, it was a straight assignment to document the first night of the curfew.
So having grown up in New York, being a Black male in New York, having COVID in New York, having protests and riot in New York, how are you seeing this? And how are you dealing with it, and how is it affecting you? And what kind of message are you looking for? Are you trying to attach yourself when you're taking these photos? What are you looking for? Is it just to kind of document it, or are you actually kind of saying, adding your voice and to it? I mean, what's going through your mind in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I'm documenting as a Black man in the first place that's a statement in itself, Yeah. So there is a lot of things that comes with the skin tone that people just have to acknowledge and appreciate. Is that's a huge that part of the dichotomy. There's not a Black person and a white person will never take the same photo, because especially if we're dealing with the same things, because we're coming from different points of view. We're coming from different perspectives, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just I embrace it. I was like, I want to see what you see, and then I want you to see what I see. So at the same time, being born and raised in New York, I have to always, I've been blessed to grow in a very diverse and very direct place where we don't have to sugarcoat a lot of these kind of conversations, and it makes it a lot easier. And I'm actually, thank God I'm from New York, because these conversations are a lot easier to have over here than I can imagine in other places.
So how do you have this conversation with people right now that the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and when someone makes a comment of all lives matter, how do you have that conversation?
The one of the main things I always try to say, what the main difference of it is no one ever is trying to take away from the point. Nobody ever is trying to diminish the point of that right now. But when you are looking at literally 400, 500 years of history, and then when we're still dealing with the same thing in 2020, there has to be a point of the conversation. Maybe we need to have a singular focus on a greater goal, because at the end of the day, if we don't get past this point, this shit will never change. And then not to say there's going to be a 2-week kind of process, but this is a long kind of fight that people have to be willing to do together, because this is all a game of acknowledgement. And I think that the biggest thing about, races and all these terms of people of color and all that stuff like that, just see me for what I am and accept that. And then there's so much other things to talk about and be invested into. So let's just care about the situations that are at hand, because these are egregiously things that are just make no sense. It makes no sense for a white kid could kill 9 people in the church, but then like, you know, I get choked out for $20. You know what I mean? Like, these are just common sense kind of things that are just logical. It's not a political statement. It's just like, this is humane.
Yeah.
So
How do we get to have these conversations? I mean, I think maybe, hopefully, we're at a point now that, you know, people are waking up and definitely. But I know throughout my full life, it's just been a repeating cycle of the same thing over and over and over. When I was young, I was born in Dallas, Texas. I was raised in New York City, but my mother, who was, you know, sort of the black sheep, wanted to leave Texas and stuff like that. And I'd go back and visit my relatives and uncles. And I remember from a very, very young age being at my uncle's house, and he would spew the N-word like it was just a regular, you know, colloquialism. Like he used it in a way that was, you know, it felt wrong. I knew it was wrong. And I remember being in that room, and my mother said, "Travis, go out of the room for a second." And I could still listen in from the other room. He's like, "This is my son, and if you ever want to see see him again, you will never ever use that word around him." From a very young age, I knew the gravity of that word, even though I didn't understand the word.
yeah,
And growing up, I always, you know, here I was someone that, you know, it's like I had dyslexia, I had a learning disability that wasn't something I could see or gravitate to. I always, you know, it's like I ran a little heavy or this, you know, not in sports, so I dealt with, you know, being overweight, you know, so suddenly I'm dealing with all these things, and being a caring and empathetic person my whole life and understanding, I just want to walk into a room and have everybody accepted. And now you're telling me that doesn't matter. It's like certain groups matter. And I understand that now. I totally understand that. But how do we let other people understand that?
It's you can't force feed it. You got to spoon feed things. You know, if some people are more logical than others, and some had to take more convincing, but then you have to just always put a situation like this comedian recently said it, like, try to say all lives matters to your wife. You know, if your wife asks you, like, you know, "Hey baby, you know, do you love me?" You say, "No baby, I love everybody." You know, imagine how that's going to go over. You know, say that shit 10 times and see how long you're going to be married to her. You know, if you won't do that to someone that you are in a relationship with, like, it's no different from like idolizing somebody on TV, you know what I mean? Like, or a person that you see at the bodega or like the taxi driver. A little bit of empathy doesn't hurt anybody, you know? And then, like, you know, and if you don't, just because you don't get it right the first time doesn't mean you have to give up. You know, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. You know, it just takes time to actually, you know, take an effort to actually care for it. So like, that's why I keep on stressing. Like, I'm happy that everybody's tired after 2 weeks. Like, you know, imagine being black for 33 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
like, so
and you guys have both been out in these protests and stuff like that. And you have an interracial relationship. What's that like for you? And how are you both coping with this and having your voice? And you've had to deal with that. And what experiences have you had? And does this really feel different, this one? Because I hope it does.
I mean, I think for me, personally, I think it feels different. There's nothing ever remotely close to, you know, what, you know, I've experienced anything like this. Like, my parents told me about this stuff in the 60s and 70s growing up out here in New York, but like, there's nothing been close. Being in an interracial relationship is something that we always just been very direct with. And then, like, if nobody's ever, I think we're just too tall that people will never say it in our faces, you know what I mean? But we've definitely gotten looks for sure in places, and like, you know, things that's a little bit awkward. But like, I think that, you know, I've always said respect is free. So if you have to genuinely really be an asshole to come at me and say something in order for us to react, and it's never happened. So thank God. Yeah.
So let's go into another big aspect of you, and that's this. So let's I'm gonna jump into something here. So why don't you tell me about Street Dreams?
So Street Dreams is a biannual publication. That's an art institution that we like to call it. And we are also a creative agency. We've been established now for 6 years. We have dual headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, and in Vancouver, Canada. But Street Dreams, the goal of Street Dreams of what we established to do is a couple of simple monikers. The first one is "Wake Up and Do What You Love," and this is a visual movement. And like, what we mean by "Wake Up, Do What You Love" is, there's a full spectrum when it comes to art and photography and creativity. And there was never a place for us to get our work published before in the first place. Like, we would try to reach out to the complex magazines and get to work with the Mass Appeals or a couple of other magazines, once in a while, or like the IDs and et cetera, the Faders at the time, but they weren't giving us a real chance and opportunity to get our work published. So when Eric, Mike, and myself decided to create Street Dreams, we wanted to create it for the social media community that never had a chance to get their work published. At first, we created a hashtag, and with the hashtag, there was a way that if you were to share the hashtag and use it on your photos, that's a way that we could not only find your work, but we also started to post these grids into our magazines. So we started to give other places for people's work to live. So it wasn't, everything always just didn't live on Instagram. So from releasing the magazines, we started to do a lot of gallery activations. And from gallery activations, we started to notice that, we have, a grassroots connection with all these different photographers, creatives, DJs, painters, and all that stuff like that, that we can really, take off and ground the ground and run it with a creative agency. So we've been working on projects, like I said, for the past 6 years, from everybody from Nike to Tribeca Film Festival to Honda to Cartier's to the Knicks to, the list goes on. And it's a lot of the stuff that actually kind of, translates into our lives and our ecosystem. That makes a lot of sense. So the next evolution of Street Dreams is that we just released our website. It took us 6 years to make a website. Don't ask me, but we finally did that. And with the Street Dreams Radio website, and also with the Street Dreams website, and with the launch of Street Dreams Radio, we've finally given a place for all the different parties that we've been doing, and a space in the radio platform as well too. So we can, start off with our music platform and then launch it also with our podcast platform. So we're creating a full ecosystem of like a new age Magnum photography, but of peoples of all ethnicities and sexualities and all, just anybody who's pretty much not an asshole. And then we have like an art institution curation for our creative agency. And also, hopefully we could keep on pushing more with educational stuff that we've been working on in the future with like the creative labs and the skill shares and all that stuff as well too.
When you sat down and said, we're creating Street Dreams, what was really the catalyst? I mean, it was just the word street in New York carries a big, heavy, there's a lot of gravity to that word. And certainly when I grew up in New York City, it was a place where I grew up in a time there was CBGB's, Studio 54, and hip hop was growing. And suddenly, where you had Blondie, who met, I believe it was Fab Five Freddy, and was brought over to Flash, and suddenly Rapture, that song came. And, this was a time where everybody kind of melded, and there was a beautiful place. So that when I think of Street Dreams, it's this beautiful place where amazing art comes from nothing, where someone could take a box, put it on the ground, and break dance on it. People can take old records and sample and create music, and you give the b-boys and the MCs and all DJs were all birthed out of this. And you had Kool Herc, who just started a movement. And it's like so for me, there's a real, was that any part of that?
Oh, no, for sure. There is like, I think one of the especially growing up in the world of hip hop, the biggest thing for hip hop for me is the sense of diversity and the sense of discovery. And then those core values is 100% installed into Street Dreams. Like the sense of discovery and the diversity of everything is the reasons what makes hip hop and music in general, it's just pretty much anything in life, so interesting. So we keeping those as the core elements of our magazine is the way of like we're not just going to feature like a bunch of people from New York in this issue, or we have different kind of ways of like even we dropped a PNW issue with a lion on it, like so people we take the word Street Dreams and flip it on so many different connotations, because it could be interpreted and mean so many things for different people. But like, the first instinct of you seeing is like, you see a black guy, a Spanish dude, and a Filipino dude, like you associate it with the hip hop connotations, and that's definitely the part of it, but it's so layered into the other points of what makes hip hop so dope is like the sense of discovery, like the diversity of it, like the community aspect of it. Like, those are the reasons, like it's like sharing like your favorite song with somebody, like the song they never heard before. It's like you have that kind of connection. It's like, oh, remember that mixtape I gave you with that one random song? It's the same kind of feeling what Street Dreams was when it first started, and it evolved into, more of an ecosystem and an institution for a lot of other people for a source of
Yeah,
inspiration.
and for me, it's carrying on a tradition of New York that seems to be almost forgotten. You know, the days where, you know, like I was talking about the all the different artists, and now it's too expensive, you know, to live in Brooklyn. It's too expensive to, you know, for this great birth of how are you still maintaining, keeping true to the artist and creation and this wonderful vibe of, you know, what is honest and true to the artist when the world is changing so much, and New York isn't that place really anymore. It's hard to find those pockets.
Yeah, I mean the truth. I mean, I've come from the world of retail, and my dad was a an electrician, so I've seen him work as a contractor. So I pretty much feel I could sell salt to a snail. Like a lot of this stuff doesn't really defer me at all. You know, if one of the things that I noticed when Trump went into office is like, you know, the truth is going to be a currency. So the more that I actually tell the truth, it's actually going to be better for me. So I just decided just to tell the truth more often, you know, like, you know, and it's been way more beneficial in business wise, and also like in all these different aspects that, you know, affect the art that we're trying to create. So like, this is easy. I love the way that this is going right now. They're just making it kind of easier for me to identify and really connect with, you know, what I want to establish, and not only in my career, but also, you know, really inspire for other photographers to try to find a place as well too, if they feel a little bit, you know, lost.
Even in the dark.
Lighting is always a good thing.
Never sleep in the dark until I realized.
We're getting into it. So tell me about Street Dreams Radio.
So Street Dreams Radio was our next baby that we just gave birth to, and the coolest thing about it is that, you know, we've ever since the inception of Street Dreams and us doing our gallery shows, we've always have been heavily involved in the music side of things. I've had a music background, you know, and you know, Mike C was one of the co-founders. He DJ'd for like 20 years, and so does Eric. Is also DJ for a long time as well too. So all of us have heavy music background. So when we first started doing galleries, we didn't want to make the galleries just like this. Kind of like this step and repeat, very stuffy kind of setting, of where, you know, you're just looking at photos and you're eating some hors d'oeuvres and you're leaving. And we wanted to make it like, you know, feel like, you know, everybody from my mom could pull up and, you know, and enjoy yourself and maybe do the electric slide at night, and then, like, you know, go home and still have a wholesome time, you know, like the balance of having like your homies there and having a wholesome time, you know. And then the more that we started to notice when we were doing the galleries is that we were doing too much of them together. So we started to separate our parties. And separating the parties, we gave one day for the gallery, we gave one day for the music, and one day for the pop-up. And then the next evolution of that is, now that we've been doing parties in the galleries for like the last, you know, 4 or 5 years, we've built up a really strong catalog and really good relationships with some of the dopest DJs and artists in the world. So being able to establish Street Dreams Radio and working heavily with Mixcloud. So shout outs to Mixcloud and those guys over there, and Anchor. You know, establishing Street Dreams Radio is like the dream that I've always wanted to start it, which would be like, you know, my own kind of photography Jay-Z, if you will, and have like my Rockefeller Records, but at the same time, eventually make my own Breakfast Club. So like being able to start with these things, and like, you know, for all the other evolutions that we want to get into, I'd rather like own and work with the music that I want to work with, rather than sourcing it in the future.
Well, I'm going to go play a couple, just the intro to your latest drop, and then we're going to finish it up with our final questions with you guys. So sit back for a minute and enjoy this. That's not it. Let's go into it.
That's not it.
Here we go.
You are now tuned in to Street Dreams Radio.
Hey, what's up, Primo? How you feeling? You live at the Bodega with Steve Sweatpants. Yeah, what's up, Pop? Let me just get a bacon and egg on the whole week, no cheese. You got no more?
Nothing, this library.
Damn. You got all rolls? You got rolls though? All right, so let me just get a bacon and egg on the roll then.
Okay.
Extra toasty. Appreciate you.
This message is to all the future generations. All y'all who have stepped up, elevated, moved into ascension, eating, drinking, being the vibes that our ancestors passed down to us in order to clear all trauma and bring forth the best in us. For it is written, we are the remnant. We are those who are next to come for the final victory. Give thanks and praises for your upliftment, for your courage, and for the power that is eminent when it comes to winning this.
Well, that is pretty awesome. I'm going to let people, I'm going to post links to that because now I work to that in the background. I sit there and listen to it. I'm so driven by music and so driven by, messages and stuff like that. And I think I become a greater artist when I have music playing in my head. I definitely am one of those people that loves working to a soundtrack.
Need it. It's very vital in my life.
I see, Jess, you can't stop yourself. You're looking at the Q&As, aren't you? Do we have a question, Jessica?
Wait,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have my own questions?
I'm teasing. I saw you kind of looking, so I know that you and I usually do that dynamic. So as we get towards here, what is your hope in covering these and what do you want to see come out of all of this? As we leave COVID and enter, hopefully an open dialogue with Black Lives Matter and in this conversation, where do you want it to go, and what part do you see yourself playing in it?
I mean, there's a lot of, I'll call this pretty much like phase 2 of it. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of, interesting ways to really attack it. I feel like, the one important thing is not to burn yourself out. Burning out is a real thing. And I think that, it's so easy to consume all this information and download and feel like you need to do so. You don't need to do something every 6 hours. You just need to make sure that you're making a concerted effort in the long run. That's something that's reasonable, and you're doing something that's within your realm. So like having short-term goals and long-term goals is the best way to kind of approach this. Because this is a long fight, man. And I don't want people to get all tired out and disappointed, because they didn't end racism. We probably, none of us is probably gonna end racism. I'm gonna tell you that right now. But we all need to make a concerted effort to make sure that it doesn't keep on perpetuating and spoiling all the fucking apples, that are gonna keep on coming, because that's the real problem. Racism is definitely taught, that is a fact. So, I mean, as long as we keep on telling the truth through our art and through finding ways to send all the different kind of petitions and all these different kind of things that you feel that is accessible and useful for your life, we need as many people on our side as possible.
Yeah, I am going to dive into 2 questions here because we have some from the audience in the Q&A, and this is open for both of you guys. Do you shoot differently at events and protests like this, or is it the same way of shooting no matter what?
Me personally, I pretty much shoot the same no matter what. Besides having, a dedicated shot list when I'm on a job, I always shoot with the same perspective, the same ultimate mission of just showing what's going on and being honest. Even with these protests, there's a lot of these moments that you could tell people want it to be taken a photo of. People dressed in these things, these outlines, and I'm not really trying to shoot the props. We want to document the real authentic moments, the feelings that are happening, and how we feel as individuals. Me as a non-Black person, I have a different perspective and different feelings than Steve about this, and what my observations are. And I just want to make sure that always transcends, whether it's an event or, whatever.
Yeah, same as it's verbatim, literally.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. I think consistency is the most important part.
As a growing photographer, is there a dialogue you have when you're out shooting at, whether it's a protest or event, that oh, I've been standing one place too long, I got to get a different angle, or I got to search for this? It's what are the as you're developing as an artist, what is the conversation you're having most recently?
I think it really depends on your personality. Personality is a big thing. I'm a pacer, so if I have these things that I pick a spot, I chill in the spot a little bit, and it's I need to move, and then I'm consistently moving. Sometimes I shouldn't be moving, taking photos, but I appreciate the pace. That's not for everybody. Some people really need to sit still, and there's nothing wrong with that. But whatever your pace is, I just don't, I'm over people getting peer pressure to feel like they need to work at a certain pace because they're photographers that they really respect do that. No, fuck that. Go at your own pace, and figure out something that really works for yourself. It's great to grab references and understand how people, conduct themselves, and you could pull what works for yourself. But, I'm a busybody, so I need to move.
I also want to add, with these protests, it's kind of something that I touched on earlier is don't forget to also be at the protest. You know, you're not just
Yeah.
there to
It's on the Coachella.
yeah, it's not a music festival. It's not, you know,
There's too much of this nowadays, and people aren't present, and they're just
exactly.
everything's watching through a cell phone or
Don't
trying
forget
to.
why you're there, you know, and
Yeah.
if you are there to just snap away, then so be it. It's going to show in your photos too, but you should actually also try to be there, understand what people are feeling. It's about empathy and also, like, you know, using your voice for the movement as well, and whatever role or platform that you have and whatever way you want to do that. So
This question is for both Jess and Steve. What type of stories do you want to shoot or see shot that will further the cause of Black Lives Matter protests beyond photographing the protests themselves?
I think this is everything right now is long term. So what I'm really curious to see is like what long term things are companies doing
yeah,
to actually, you know, facilitate the messages that they're spewing over the like these black squares and like these words. They're nice and they show a sense of solidarity. So I don't want to be dismissive towards it at all, because like it all counts. But like, what's the next step? And how are we actually going to document these stories? Because, you know, a lot of us, I mean, my grandpa's been, you know, my grandpa is like, you know, God rest his soul, but like he used to have to like steal shrimp to like feed my family back in the 60s. Like, you know, I don't want to hear like, those stories, like, we came a long way. So if everything that's happening from this point on, I want to see actual stories that are documenting, like say if it's an educational program that you're running with kids in Bed-Stuy, I want to see that story. Or if there's something that you're doing in the middle of like Arizona with a bunch of kids, or wherever the story is, and like the more specific and niche it is, like I want to see that, because then I can actually see that you're doing your job.
and to add on to that, I want to see that even internally, you know, in leadership positions. I want to see more Black, Indigenous, people of color, more, you know, LGBTQ, and I want to see that representation across the board in the photo industry. You know, more Black photographers, more POC photo editors. You know, we need it across the board. Producers, hair, makeup. You know, every voice and role counts in this. And I just hope that it's not just some blanket statement that all these companies are putting out. And there's actual actionable items and things that are going to be done. And hopefully, you know, the question was photography wise, I just hope that representation comes through and is consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think? How do you think we recover coming out from this? I mean, we were looking at just, you know, trying to recover an economy from COVID and people out of work and restaurants not making it. And it was a tough road already, but now we're adding, you know, a new voice and an election on top of that. And, you know, and an election that I don't think is going to be like anything we've ever seen in our history. And it's quite frightening. Well, where do you see the world, and what's it like for Street Dreams? Like what you have plotted a course for this? How are you as personal photographers and looking towards your world? Like, geez, I might have to get a second job, or no, I'm doing good, and I've adjusted this way to, you know, to look at the future, and I see this as, you know, being pioneers of a new frontier. How are you approaching it?
I mean, I'm not opposed to any other ways that anybody else is trying to, like, get their footing, but like, sounds like the simple way to say is like, I've been broke before. So this is nothing new to me. I had to sleep on my own couch for like a year in order to really like make my own dreams come true. So there is a little bit of a reassessment and an adjustment that we have to take, because I've definitely been hurt as well too. And there's definitely been gigs that, fell right through my fingertips. It does suck, but there's other things that suck as well too. So as long as we stay the course and make sure that we're doing things to keep myself active, like going to the protests or finding other ways to being, just aware of the situation in the world. Or if there's nothing to do with myself, then maybe this is the time that I need to finish our website. There's literally so many things to work on that we don't really understand, that we need to assess, that, it just left us in a really good place to say that we actually have plenty of things to do like now in the future. So this is the great time not to be distracted.
Yeah.
And I'll add kind of onto what Steve is saying is and not to pull the productivity card, is really not about productivity, but there's an infinite amount of things that we can do to just be better in our career or just better as human beings, you know, whether it's, and I see watching movies as market research, you know, anything that inspires inspiration, that to me is adding to my livelihood in whatever way. And even if it's just self-care, I think all these things are so important, and to just keep pushing that forward. And I kind of forgot what your other question was, but
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, deep inside me is like, I cannot understand a world where we so quickly look for the differences between each other, because it takes so much effort to hate someone. It takes so much effort and pain to be angry at people. It takes so much, when at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want to be happy. We all live happy lives. We all want healthy, you know, families. We all want to, you know, take care of the ones we love. It's like, there's so many things that bring us together more than they'll ever divide us apart. Why do we keep searching for the differences? And that's, I think, my greatest battle personally, is trying to figure out, and especially social media, which I think is, you know, as much as I use it and as a tool and to promote my work, I think it's probably one of the worst things that's ever been invented. And so people are so quick. It's like, you know, it's like here, I constantly every day try and bring myself back to a point where I see someone make an outlandish statement like, oh, you know, it's like Bill Gates is, you know, trying to microchip everyone. And then, like, instantly it's like, oh, that's the most idiotic thing. It's like, no, maybe I'm trying to, you know, it's like, where do we get to a point where we're trying to, you know, come together? Like, everybody is like 50-50 now. That the world is so divided. How do we get back to that healing point? And is it a person? Is it this moment right now? It's like, for me, that's the most troubling thing that I grapple with at the moment.
yeah, it's hard, especially when we don't have a real leader, you know. But I think community events, community whatever is super important. And obviously it's something we can't really do right now, but as soon as things start getting back to normal, I feel like our souls will be healed a little bit, just to be around other people, and to, you know, getting on the train in New York especially, and just feeling that feeling of like humanity. It's kind of something that we're missing right now, and we're so hyper focused on the virtual world that cancel culture is like at an all-time high, and, you know, all these things. And you said people are constantly searching for a divide. I really feel like the dividers are really just being uncovered. You know, these racists and these people, the internet is just showing them clearer and clearer. So let's wash them all out, and let's just heal ourselves and start, you know, pushing forward.
And one of the greatest things I saw recently, you know, written, and it's been written before, is it's racism's always been there. It's just being filmed.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, you know, I think the most important thing is no longer to be silent about it, is to call it out. If you see it, call it out. Don't let it be the norm. Don't let it stand. If you see someone being in a store being thing, call it out. You know, support each other. It's time to end it. And with that, I'm going to come to the last final questions in the speed rounds. So to each of you, what's the best single piece of advice that you've ever received? It can be about photography, or it can be something that your grandmother told you that you repeat yourself, that, you know, that's the one piece of advice you'd probably want to give to your kids or give to friends. What is something that has traveled with you that's been an important piece of advice in the travels of your lifetime?
I'll say one that is really business, but also life advice that I heard in college. One of my favorite professors, Professor Asuma, who was my sales teacher, and he always said, under promise, over deliver. And it just, as, you know, ethic wise or business ethics wise, I always try to remember that. I always repeat that. I always, you know, managing expectations. It just kind of applies to a lot of things. I know it's not like the most cliche write this on a t-shirt thing, but that's just something that always follows me.
My grandma says, like there's the joint she's always says, it's like a bad association spoils useful habits. So I stick to the bad association pretty much anything. So if I'm too tapped in, I'm literally like, I've probably been reading too much of this stuff. I need to tap out. So that's bad association from anything, people or places or things, anything like that. So bad association spoils useful habits.
Oh, very well put. That's a good one to take along. On the most basic or deepest level, what is photography to you personally?
It's just a way to, you know, put put what we're seeing and what's true to our hearts onto something physical. And even in the virtual, it's still kind of physical because you're looking at a phone, you're looking at whatever. So just think it's a way to express ourselves, to express our truths. And
But deeper, what is it to you personally? What is photography to you? I mean, is it like what you wake up for? Is it just a means to an end? What is it personally to you?
It's something that gets me going, honestly. Like when I start feeling really depressed, I literally can just go outside and shoot, and it completes me. It's if I can't shoot, then I don't know what I would be doing, honestly.
Yeah.
It's not that deep the way I said it, but it really feels.
No, that's as deep as it gets. Because I mean, I think hopefully as photographers, that should be what it be. It's like for me, it would be like cutting off appendages. I can't do without them. They're part of me. And the camera and it's in the language is part of me. How about you?
I mean, I think it's like for me, it's like folk tales. Like why you could read a story, you could actually just take photos and you could just look at folk tales. So storytelling at its peak is being able to see a story from a person you've never met before, and being able to still understand what's going on. So that's what photography feels like.
All right, so we're going to go into a speed round here. So what was the last, we'll go back and forth. Jess, we'll start with you. What was the last thing? What's your guilty pleasure TV show?
Oh, guilty pleasure?
Yeah.
Can you go first?
No.
Guilty pleasure. There's gotta be one. Because none of them are guilty. I don't ever feel guilty. I'm like, ooh, this is always.
You don't watch some reality show, or it's like, oh, geez.
Shows now.
No, it could be. He's like, you know what? I watch. All right, we'll skip that one.
Everything I watch is incredible. I'm sorry, but
I watch only the best stuff. All right, I'm going to change your question. Then, what is something that everyone does that everyone looks stupid doing? No matter who they are, they look stupid doing.
Being an asshole. Being an asshole. You always look like an asshole.
Nice, Stephen. Is cereal?
Farting will always be funny. Farting will always be funny.
Your question is cereal soup.
It's a delicious fruity
Cereal,
pebbles
no
fruit.
damn soup, man. No.
Cereal's more candy than in the soup. I love cereal.
Jessica, does
on a sandwich? Are you gonna?
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No.
I'm not from New York, so let me just say I do not mind a pineapple with a pepperoni pizza.
Hell no.
I'm with you.
Sorry, I'm not a purist in that way.
Yeah, neither am I. If you could be in any TV show, book, or movie, what would it be? If you could be one of the characters, or inhabit a world.
Maybe Game of Thrones, and hopefully I don't die miserably, but I would.
There's not a lot of life expectancy if you're in that show.
It's fine.
I have no idea.
I'm gonna ride a dragon.
Many. I want to be in like Dragon Ball Z or something like that.
Oh, I didn't even think about the cartoon realm. That's like a whole.
What celebrity would you want to play you in your biopic of your own life?
Idris Elba.
Ooh, I like that one. That's a good one.
Damn, Morgan Freeman.
For you.
I don't care. Morgan Freeman.
That's a good
He
call.
can act. He can act it. Yeah, absolutely.
All you need is a real voice.
Kind of like a like.
What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Don't wait more than 3 times. Honestly, I have no.
Worst piece of advice.
Honestly, just listening to people in general is kind of scary sometimes.
My dad almost killed me once. We were driving up in New Hampshire. It was late at night, and he's like, "Just go fast on this road. There's never any police on this road." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." So I started speeding. I'm telling you, like 10 seconds after that, the cop lights came off. And you'd think the worst part was him telling me to speed at night, but no, it was like, get out of the car and greet him and tell him hi. I'm like, no, Dad, I don't think I should get out of the car. And so he's, no, just get out of the car. We're up in New Hampshire. I get out of the car. He's like, get back in the car. I'm like, Dad, I told you I shouldn't get in the car.
2 pieces of bad advice.
Yeah, right?
No, that's hilarious though.
What's the worst piece of gear you've ever wasted your money on?
Oh, God, where do I begin?
So much, honestly.
I know.
Sea monkeys, probably.
The X-ray glasses, they never worked.
It was all a scam. It was all a
Man,
scam.
these questions are hard, Travis. You didn't get us no time.
Honestly,
to
like I think I had a Sega Saturn for a little bit, and that was a really bad call.
She left it alone.
What was your first celebrity crush? We're going to end it on that one.
First celebrity crush.
I think. Probably either Topanga from Boy Meets World.
Oh, Topanga. She was a local.
And what was the other name? Nia Long and the Fresh Prince.
Nia Long. She's still bad. You know, I can't tell you the first one, but now that we're on the Game of Thrones topic, like Jon Snow.
Okay, that's fair enough. That
And then I
was-
discovered he's like 5'4", so there goes that. There goes that fantasy.
Guys, I want to thank you for spending so much time with me tonight. I love you both. I wish the best for you both, and I look forward to working with you both and sharing some amazing times and some food and drink in the future. Any bits and pieces of last minute stuff you want to leave people with? Where to find you, events coming up with Street Dreams or anything like that?
We literally just launched a print sale with New York Nico. If you go to New York Nico's Instagram page, it's going to be all the details going to be over there. So Jess is going to have prints available. We have prints from Devin Allen, who I believe he just did got another Times cover. And
that goes to the organizations that are helping fight for the movement.
Yeah.
So keep staying loud.
Yep.
Vote if that's your thing, but definitely
It should be everybody's thing, please.
we had an extension for the absentee ballot, so get out there, use your voice.
No justice, no peace.
No justice, no peace. That is ringing. We're gonna end on that.
We're going to end on that, guys. Thank you so much. Be well.
All
You
right,
too.
Bye.
Until it ends. Like, should we hit end too?
What are you gonna do?